tons of the beginnings of ideas, and a lot of these songs, like the very early skeleton of those songs had happened right before all this. Just like we were lucky that we built that studio just in time.
Yeah. This podcast is about the both of you and your journey in music. We'll talk about the EP you released, and I'm really curious how you guys met and started Oh My's. So
yeah,
sweet. I was gonna say that. Are you? Well, first off, were you guys born and raised in the same area? Like, did you know each other growing up or no?
No, we're both raised in different parts of the north side of the city. We really crossed paths. I got a scholarship to a school that was just south of me, and it was down the street from Nick's high school. And so we had a mutual friend that went to both, left my school, went to his, and introduced us. And so that's kind of.
Oh, okay. Well, talk to me about where you grew up then, Maceo. Oh, I lost your audio there.
Crazy. Okay. Well,
now I can hear you.
All right. Cool. Yeah. So we met through a mutual friend that went to my high school and then left and went to his. And so like fused friend groups.
Sure. Well, how far away were you from like the high school you got a scholarship to?
Switching back and forth. I was probably I would say it's probably 5 miles, right, Nick?
Oh, so it's close. It wasn't like you traveled clear across the state or anything like that.
No. It's just like decent travel in the city.
Sure. Yeah, I guess 5 miles in the city would be kind of a nightmare.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of train.
Yeah. Well, talk to me about where you originally grew or where you grew up.
Yeah, I grew up in Rogers Park, where I live now, like literally down the street from where I grew up. And it's like the furthest north neighborhood in the city.
Okay.
And probably, at least for me, my favorite, but one of the most diverse neighborhoods, both like ethnically, socioeconomically, in the city, which is a very segregated city, and then one of the most in the whole country. It's like a designated sort of welcoming neighborhood for immigrants of all different types. So you've got people from the Middle East, from Asia, from Africa, and Latin America, sort of all in this one neighborhood. So we eat really good food up here.
I was going to say, you must have some great food.
Yeah.
All over the place. That's awesome. How did you get into music? Were your parents musicians at all, or music in your family at all?
My parents aren't musicians, but music was always in the household. My dad, big dancer and music fan. And my mom too, and so they just made it really made it a point to have music and music from their cultures. My dad being Black from the United States and my mom being Cuban, that sort of, though that music was constantly played around the house and at home. And I think really the first times I really saw music being, I obviously I like saw music as like an active activity in like dancing in the home. But like when I saw the actual making of music live was really actually through my grandparents on both sides. My grandfather, would like to sing on, old Cuban boleros and stuff. He lived with me for some time. And then my grandmother on my dad's side, spirituals. And so seeing them both separately at different points actually like singing and it sounding good was sort of like definitely the first place that I saw music being something I could do.
Okay. And what was the first instrument you learned? Was it singing? Or were you like a singer as a kid growing up?
No, never singing. I like took some lessons at this community organization in piano, but that didn't really stick. And then really the first instruments, and that was pretty young. And it wasn't until probably when I got to middle school where I started taking Latin percussion, congas, mostly congas, but some timbales and others. The basics
Mm-hmm.
of Latin percussion, and that's really when I started really getting my feet wet, both playing with other people, because with percussion, Latin percussion, it's not something you do by yourself. You practice
Sure.
by yourself, but it's always in concert with other people.
Uh-huh.
And so that's where I started, like, finding like musical communities of Latin percussionists, but then also starting to like think about how I could make music, not just the traditional music my mom was trying to make sure I learned, but also, how I could apply it to what I was loving to do, which was like hip hop. And
Mm-hmm.
so started at some point to take what I learned from that and, started making beats and eventually started trying to write my own songs once I figured out I could sing somewhat.
Right on. Awesome. Well, Nick, how about you? Where were you born and raised?
Yeah, I grew up in Wicker Park, super centralized north side neighborhood of Chicago, like right off of the train line that goes straight to downtown and the airport. And so it's always been like a pretty busy area. But and just growing up, like it was like the early stages of being like actively gentrified neighborhood from like a Puerto Rican and Eastern European community into just, like by now it's a very yuppie white, sort of middle upper class type neighborhood. But growing up, it was like tons of record stores, skateboard shop that I lurked around all the time.
Yeah.
So like tons of just really like hanging out in all these stores. I had an older brother, like 4 years older than me, and we would just skate around the neighborhood, bother the local store owners, and learn about music from hanging out at the local record shop and from people playing music at the skateboard shop. But definitely like a really hip, like cool, just artist type community growing up, coffee shops and all that stuff. So kind of like the little kids that everybody knew in like a 20 to 30-year-old community that like everybody kind of brought us up and showed us what was hip and cool and all that type of stuff. So that was really a lot of my childhood.
That's cool. I mean, I skateboarded growing up, and that's really how I learned about a lot of music and different artists and bands and stuff, because it's so integrated in that scene. I mean, you'd watch the skate videos and it's like, oh, what is this song? Oh, this is, whoever, and like Far Side. I'm like, whoa, okay, this is cool. I'm gonna go listen to that. Was that kind of a way you're discovering music at all?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, from the actual skateboard videos and then like learning more context. I mean, one of the main people who worked at the skateboard shop was like my first musical collaborator, like,
oh, wow.
like 20 something years in age gap. But he had been in tons of bands, like funk bands in the 80s and stuff, Stevie Dread, and was a really just an amazing like mentor of mine in general, just in life growing up, but then also was a really great drummer and had a couple friends who all had a studio space down the street. And so that was like 12, 13, 14. Those were the first recordings I was ever doing. And it was super just kind of haphazard, like very open jam session. They weren't very concerned about song structure or anything. It was just a bunch of dudes who like to play music together and like hang out for hours, like just with the tapes running. So like other than definitely like learning songs from those videos and just hanging out and being a fly on the wall in the skateboard shop, but a lot of those people were DJs. A lot of them were, he was a drummer. A lot of them were in skateboard and music other than just the videos. Like there's
right, there's a culture there, right?
Cross connections to different cultures. So like a lot of the people in there, like the owner was had been in punk rock bands and was like an avid punk rock scene supporter and part of that community. And then you had Stevie Dread, big into funk and hip hop. And then the other dude who worked there was a hip hop DJ. So more than just those videos, it was really like everybody also had a music scene to turn me on to. Wow. And like put me on to music that I would have not even heard in those videos or wouldn't have heard at home.
Sure. Wow. Well, were you a musician prior to that? Like when you're skateboarding, you were like, what was the first instrument you learned?
Yeah, so I started playing instruments like super early on. Like the ukulele was the first instrument. Like just I was too small. I was just expressing interest in music and instruments young, I think. And my dad, both of my parents are big into music, but my dad, neither of them are musicians. Neither of them had any participation in making music, but my dad had like a huge record collection. Music is really important to him. So I grew up around a lot of music and must have just shown interest in music early on. So I was too small for a guitar, so they got me a ukulele, and then I liked that and wanted to go to lessons. So at some point I graduated to like guitar and piano. And so yeah, at a young age, I was already learning a little bit about different instruments and like learning some of my favorite Beatles or Bob Marley songs and like all these sort of essential big songs by big artists, like starting to learn them on guitar and ukulele and piano and stuff like that. So yeah, I was big into music early on.
Okay. And you said you met up with the guy from the skate shop who was 20 years older than you are when you're in like 13 years old and you're recording. Like, were you playing guitar with them? Like, how did that form? You just kind of like asked?
Piano was the thing that I like has always been my main instrument that I had like the most knew the most about, was most comfortable on, like was at that point 13, 14. Like I've listened back to some of those recordings, which is cool that I have them, but like they're definitely still like cringeworthy, like the musical choices that I'm making, but I was at least capable of like sitting down with them and trying to hold my own, and they let me grab the keys. There was no one else trying to be the piano player in the crew, so that was what I played. There was already a bass player and a guitar player, stuff like that.
So you already were playing piano at that point.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Maceo, so when you said you were jamming with people also prior to meeting Nick, and then how did you guys end up? You went to the same high school. Did you start jamming right away, or like how did that relationship form as far as you guys meeting and befriending each other?
Well, we didn't go to the same high school, but
the mutual friend, the jump between.
Right
got it. Okay,
right down the street. And so like really, we didn't really actually play music together until I graduated from high school. I'm a year older.
Okay.
We were like just kind of like in the same group of kids that like one kid's parents weren't around that often, so we went and all partied at his house all the time. And so like
there's always that kid, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In every town there's that kid.
Putting people together, you know. And so like to be like, we weren't really close during any of that time, and like kind of didn't really like trust each other because we both were like reaching for the aux chord constantly or playing, you know, music that both of us liked, but like we're like, well, who's this person playing this?
You guys were trying to like compete as far as like DJing the party.
Yeah, you know, aux chord battles.
Yes.
And so like, you know, we both knew each other, played music, but it wasn't until a friend that was close to both of us in the crew, Tom Shuba, he was like, you guys really need to you know, make some music together. You know, Nick plays keys, I know you play guitar and sing, and like I think you guys have like similar musical interests and we should make music. And that didn't really turn into anything until I graduated high school, and I like talked this kid into buying from my high school to buy studio time. And I was like, oh yeah, I got a bunch of songs, I got a band together, it's gonna be good, man, don't worry about it. And then I definitely didn't have a band. I had like 6 half-written songs, 5 half-written songs. And then I was at Lollapalooza that year, 2007, and was running around during the Kanye concert and bumped into Nick, and I was like, well, shit, I know he plays music. So at that point, I didn't have a phone. I asked him to like write his number down on my arm. I was like, I got studio time in like 2 weeks. So, I got some songs. He said he had a couple half-written songs too. And it just kind of started from there. We got together and like tried to hash out the unfinished songs we had. And that took about a week, a little bit more. And then with the remainder of the time, we like threw together a band of people that I had been playing with at high school, and then people that Nick had been playing with. He was in like a bunch of after school and out of school jazz programs, and so like he brought a horn player and a drummer, and I brought a bass player, and one of my close friends at the time, and then one of the original band members, Zach Wicks, was an MC at the time, because I was like singing, but still really early in my singing, and definitely wasn't like confident enough to like to lead a band, like on the stage, or be the only vocal happening. And he was just tremendous and big inspiration to both of us, but tremendous writer, amazing stage presence, and just amazing human being. Rest in peace. And he was sort of like part of the energy and fire to like fused it all together. And so, yeah, and that's kind of how we started. We had a recording of those songs. And then once we had those, like, all right, these don't sound bad. Well, we should probably play some shows, right? Like we have some music, I guess. The next thing is to play shows. And like, yeah, okay, we need a band. We have to be a band now. So we have to have a name. So we figured that out. And then.
And this is the same group of people that recorded that you all kind of threw together in the studio?
Well, it was, because it was, for the most part, because it was Nick and I's project, like they were down to come and play whenever, but, it was like our writing, and they came and helped make it sound good. But the core of the band was in those original recordings. Our drummer and our bass player at the time, Carter Lang, amazing producer and badass dude. He was in the band for a long time. And then members of the horn section, like, because we started so young, and it was at the age of people either going off to school or still being in high school and not being able to come to shows or performances or whatever the case may be, there was sort of over the past whatever years, like a changing group of faces, depending on who had to leave town and whatever. But the core was then, and then we just kind of haphazardly started figuring out what we wanted to make and who we wanted to be, because at that point it was just some songs and a couple high school kids and with no real plan.
And you guys just would play around Chicago area, and eventually you did an EP, what, in 2000? Potty Mouth, was that your first like EP?
Yeah, that was the first EP, and that had like a couple songs from those original recordings, and then a couple other ones. And that, like, we really just started playing shows wherever we were allowed or not allowed, but were let in, because we were so young. Like, playing in bars and clubs was pretty hard to navigate.
Sure. Yeah.
But there were a couple people that were willing to bend the rules. And so we just started playing, and that, I think that once we started playing shows, I think that really sort of galvanized us, and like was like, okay, this is, we're a band and we love playing our music live. It's not just some songs we wrote together in like, either of our bedrooms and then recorded, in a studio, but it's like to be shared with people and to perform. And so I think that's, once we started playing shows, is when we really decided that, this was something that we wanted to push further.
And then that's when you decided, like, let's pursue this as
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
career
this is the
path.
homage. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Well, that happened
That's
like
a slower development.
yeah, that was
Okay.
we sort of slid into that being like, oh yeah, this is what we want to do. But at that point it was just like, this is fun, this is where we want to put energy.
Okay.
And really like for at least the first 5 years, obviously we were hustling and wanting to play shows and wanting to get our music out there, but the thoughts of it being a career was kind of not even a thing. It was just like, we're a band and we want to play music, and the thought of it being a career or like bringing any kind of money was very, very far away.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think Potty Mouth didn't even come out,
less.
and Potty Mouth didn't even come out until like 2009 or I think like 2010. So like
Okay.
at least that first 3 years, and then it was a gradual like increase of professionalism and like choosing it as a career path. Definitely even like for years after that, but like the release, us getting our like our shit together enough to at least make those records, the Potty Mouth project, and like start to put that out and figure out how that was like, that was more the beginning of trying to figure out how it worked as a business and all of that. Because those first 3 years was the only business side of it was definitely just trying to play local shows and build a local performance audience. But like that first audience base, really, they weren't showing up because of any recordings. It was just through word of mouth, like the communities that we were a part of, and then getting better at like bringing a fun experience and a dope night of show and entertainment and fun. And like, so our first little following was just friends and associates and friends of friends who had a fun time at the first show and continued to come back. And I don't think any of them had heard any of our demos or any of like the Omais as a recording band. It was really just the Omais as a live gigging band.
Okay. So, when would you say that all changed and this was like, okay, this is something we really should pursue? Was that when you put out the first album?
Starting with Potty Mouth, that was the gradual, like maybe the very, very beginning. That was like when we saw our first radio play in
Oh wow, what was that like?
Chicago. And I mean, yeah, that was the same weekend that we played the Metro for the first time, which is a huge venue in Chicago. And got to open up for our close friends, the kids these days back then. But so that was like baby steps levels of starting to take it seriously and starting to think about it professionally. At least that's in my head where it started to kick off. I don't know about from Maceo.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it was similar, maybe a little bit further down the line, that it even just became, when you're in, your city and you're playing music at venues and you're like building your following at that age or whatever. The world is pretty small, it's like, oh shit, like we get to play the Metro, like cool, all right. That's like, check, we done it,
Right.
And then I think it was once we started collaborating, and then I feel like really around the time that we put out Chicago Style, and then subsequently went on a national tour opening up for ZZ Ward, that sort of the horizons sort of broadened a little bit, because we were like, okay, this is what a national touring band looks like. This is what a tour looks like. And this is what a going to LA and playing some like, music sessions are, or taking meetings, or going to New York and playing gigs. And sort of once it became a little bit bigger than just the couple venues that we played in the city and the couple people that were at our shows that we knew in the city, because Chicago's a big city, but it's a big small city. And so I think that was, for me at least, when it was like, oh shit, like this could be something. And I think it took a little bit longer even for it to be like, this is the something, this is what I want to do. But even it being on the horizon, I think that really started like post Chicago Style.
Well, I would say, I mean, having on Chicago Style, having Chance the Rapper on the first song on the record, that must have been like Tell me, that's must have been a huge accomplishment, a huge milestone.
Well, that's
Well,
a different time period, though.
Oh, that
at
was a
that
different
point,
time period.
yeah, I mean, at that point, he was, because like some of the kids these days was a big band in the city.
Uh-huh.
And they, a number of people in that band were members of our band at certain points prior to that, because they're a little younger than us. And Chance was really like, I only knew him as their friend slash one of the hype men on stage, because he's in
Oh,
high school at this age, and so like
okay. Wow,
I'd
I didn't
known of
realize
him.
that.
Yeah, I'd known of him. Nico Segal, like there's a close friend who was in the band, and I went to elementary school with. And he's like sort of like how I even like had Chance on our radar as just a person. And then we were working with Blended Babies on the project, and they were like, "Hey, there's this kid Chance. He's working on music. He's about to put out a project sometime soon. You mind if he comes in the studio?" And we're like, "Oh yeah, oh Chance, like yeah, know him, but not like didn't really know him for his own personal music at that
Mhm.
point." And yeah, so he came in, and the song was about my grandfather who had just recently passed. And I was already a little apprehensive because of the subject matter and it being very fresh, and like, okay, well, like, who is this new kid that's going to come in, and like, do I trust him to like put, and I didn't imagine raps on the song, period. But then
Uh-huh.
like, do I trust him to take that subject matter and like, which is really delicate and really personal and family oriented, and like to take that story further, and
Mhm.
and he just came in and killed it. It ended up being a lot of what I know his music, him to be really great in his music, which is being able to like sift through really intimate and sort of family moments, and so it just
Mhm.
ended up working really perfectly. But yeah, I mean, at that point, he was like a local kid doing
That's crazy. And then,
I
I
think
mean, nowadays he's one of
oh
the
yeah.
biggest artists on the planet, right?
Oh yeah.
I think he dropped 10 Day before Chicago Style came out, but when we recorded that, 10 Day wasn't even out yet.
Yeah.
So like
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
right before his first full mixtape came out. All that was out was 5 Day, which was a 5-song version of 10 Day. So but that had nostalgia on it, which was a really beautiful song. So
Mhm.
that was the one thing that I had already become a big fan of, that made it seem like potentially Wonder Years could be an amazing fit for him. But I understood Maceo's hesitate. He I don't know if Maceo had even heard that song yet, because it was very brand new. So it was,
Mhm.
but yeah, it was
Yeah, that's
a different time
sure.
period.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about like, yeah, I don't know if I trust this guy. Like, because nowadays it's like if Chance the Rapper called you and asked you to if he wants to collaborate with you, it's like one of those career changing for
Oh
an
yeah.
a younger band now. You know what I mean? Like it is just
Oh
funny to
yeah.
hear those
Oh
stories
yeah.
about him being so young and being like, I don't know about this guy, and then the success that he eventually has. It's so funny.
Oh
Well,
yeah. Yeah, it's just like no, it's just like,
sorry.
like trusting someone to come in. It's just, like trusting someone to come into a super personal and like raw sort of moment in a song. My
Mhm.
grandfather just passed. So I was like, I don't know if this high school kid is
Yeah.
really gonna be able to dig into those deep emotions, and he did.
Right.
So, yeah.
Wow. Wow. And you said when that record came out, that's when you got your first tour opening up for ZZ Ward.
Sometime after
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. How did that connection happen?
Yeah. So the producers that we had worked with for Chicago Style, Blended Babies, had also done some work for her, and they used and one of the songs that actually the first song that I ever like wrote, they actually ended up repurposing it and using it for one of her songs called Darling, and then
Oh.
my original one was called Little Darling. And so yeah, so that's kind of how that sort of all happened, and she was super sweet, and her whole band was super sweet, and welcomed us on. We were like, you know, super not super super green to the whole experience. And yeah, learned a lot.
And from that tour, what was the next milestone for you guys?
The next milestone, I think, was, I mean, to be honest, it wasn't until what, Nick? Like, I think after that, we realized we needed to record more music. And so I think really it was a big gap of time of us learning how to record and write. You know, I think like we had spent some time playing shows at the beginning of the band, and then, you know, our sessions for Chicago Style were really our first sessions really in a real studio. And so getting the glimpse of like, okay, this is how, you know, the process of recording happens and producing. You know, there's like, you can have a song, but then it can sound a million different ways depending on, you know, what you do in the studio. And because we didn't have access to a studio, just like building out our own. And I lived with Nick at that point, and so we had a home studio. And, you know, I guess the milestones are really about creating music, you know, like I think, and that's why personally, in some ways, you know, I think it took a lot longer for us to really look at it as a career, because, you know, we were really just interested in making music. And at that point in Chicago, there was so much, so much budding talent and like amazing community of people that it was just about like creating with different folks from all different types of genres of music and like having fun. And I don't think that, at least in our head, completely transferred to like, this is going to be a career. So like Humble Masterpiece was, I think, our first step into like, okay, let's try to produce. You know, it's like super roughly produced, but I think that was sort of what started us on our way. And from there, I think headlining our own like metro shows in the city. Steps. Yes.
Wait, we dropped.
We lost you for a second there.
We'll just starting to tour, like our actual own headlining show, and then starting to tour. I think those were the biggest sort of next steps for us. But really it was the music, you know, learning so much from collaborating with a bunch of different people in the city and different musicians, because that was always changing. Yeah, I think it was mostly about being immersed in what was happening in Chicago for a little while.
Okay. And you obviously stayed in contact with Chance because he was on the Tomorrow record.
Yeah.
I think he did another song with you guys in between there as well.
Yeah, everybody within that community, like that was definitely the time frame where on any given day, all types of different amazing artists of all different genres could be hanging out in our living room, like right outside of our home studio. Like it was like a waiting room, or, you know, like it was an endless cycle of people coming through the house that were all really talented. So that whole time frame, like around Humble Masterpiece all the way up to Keeping the Faith, but right before and after the ZZ Ward tour, that was all like just super organic, constantly. Either I was letting Maceo know that somebody told me they were coming over and we should get ready for a session, or Maceo was telling me that I had 10 minutes to get ready because a bunch of people were about to come through our house and make music. Like it happened from day to day, like very fluidly.
Or they just knock on the door.
Or they just knock on the door, or we just run into them at like on the street, like because it was a busy neighborhood and it was, you know, anybody might be out and about, and then all of a sudden we're all making a song together. So
wow. So those records were done. Was Tomorrow done in your house?
No, Tomorrow was the first project post
the house.
First project in studios.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like, yeah, we did Chicago Style in the studio, and then we did Tomorrow in a studio, and everything in between
was done in your house.
And tomorrow was like when like we stopped living in the same house together. So it changed, like it made like a different but super what I think was a really healthy change, but just it made it so that it needed a little bit more intentionality to like even just making a song. As simple as it still was, because Maceo was only 10 blocks from my house, but just that distance and the fact that we actually had to like plan on when we were going to get up and make music, that changed, and it took a while to figure out that process, that creative process, versus just literally at any given moment, nighttime, morning, afternoon, living together, the day could become a song. But like that process changed around the time of Tomorrow, where we were more intentionally making time to write songs and record songs, and yeah.
All right. Well, it sounds like with this new record, though, it kind of came back full circle. Didn't you build a studio during the pandemic and record the record in your house again?
Well, not in the house. So like, Tomorrow was, aside from Chicago Style, was like really our second time being in real studios, like consistently, and working on a project in a real studio. And there was really amazing process, like learned a lot. And then also like, with what we loved, and then also learned a lot of what we didn't, or what we needed to do sort of not in a studio with like, the clock ticking and a bunch of people,
time is money type deal.
Exactly. And so on a studio space like in Rogers Park, and I just moved back to Rogers Park, and the whole building is like none of them are musicians. It's like carpenters and a pool hall and a bunch of other random things. But there was a space, and it was, we could afford it, and so we just built it out, and built like isolation booths, and took what we learned from working in studios, and like was like, okay, how do we do this for ourselves? We're obviously not going to mix it ourselves, but we want to be able to create and like explore sounds on our own time. And also, there's like always this thing about being in a studio of you hearing it in your head what you want, and then trying to like communicate it to somebody, and the engineer, which half the time works and half the time just it gets lost in translation. And so to like begin to give yourself the vocabulary and to get your hands in it yourself was kind of what we were shooting to do. And so when we built it out, it was like right before COVID hit, and which was actually a blessing because all the studios shut down. And so once COVID, we were like, well, shit, we have a studio fully, fresh and built out. And so we just spent all of our time in there. And that was a lot, sort of like a hybrid. I really looked at it as like a hybrid of sort of like what we were doing prior to Tomorrow when we lived together, and sort of the organicness of the space, and also endless amount of time to actually to experiment, And so we did that, but then also, with us learning, from the engineers in the studios, the basics, as well as then sending it to them to mix, we kind of found like some sort of happy middle ground, where didn't feel constrained by being in a studio, but then also could use some of what we can't do ourselves.
And would you say like the pandemic, when having all that time, did you feel like it affected the record at all?
Yeah, I think well, I think the time it was like a very introspective time, and because of that, pieces of it were songs that had been started just prior to it, and pieces of them were ones that started during it. But I think the songs that we chose and the songs that we finished were really informed by, you know, what was going on, because there's so much about interpersonal sort of relationships, whether they're, you know, romantic or not. It was kind of really about figuring out, looking at all those relationships from a good amount of distance that we haven't had, you know, as people, like the whole world just shutting down and not seeing people really gave a lot of perspective to those. And so I think in that way it really did. And then also in terms of the process of recording, I think this is probably the first project where, you know, the majority of everything is played by us. We have some drums from Alfonso Jones and some bass from Boyang Matsapola, and a little bit of trombone from J.P. Floyd, all members of the band at different points. But like, you know, I play drums and bass on songs. You know, there's a lot more guitar or other things that usually I would do a little bit of or sub out to have somebody else do or whatever. So I think it just forced us to, even on the engineering, and just figure it out ourselves and, like, you know, okay, lay it down. And if it doesn't sound exactly the way we want it, that's good for now. And we'll figure out how to get someone to play it better if we need to. But a lot of the stuff just ended up sticking. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the process, for all of the terrible things that came with that time, I think also is a really big growing point for us.
It's amazing that you guys are able to have, you know, inspiration, because I've talked to a lot of artists. Either they had a lot, like they were inspired by everything that was going on and like they just needed to get it out, or they were like, oh my gosh, I've been sitting in this house for you know, now what's the 2 years, and yeah, you know, how am I gonna pull any inspiration and any inspiration for something I'm not do. It's like you aren't out living, right? I mean, you're more. Did you run into that at all?
Definitely. Yeah, we definitely experienced a good amount of that. And I think we were also really fortunate to have, we always have tons of the beginnings of ideas, and a lot of these songs, like the very early skeleton of those songs had happened right before all this. Just like we were lucky that we built that studio just in time.
Yeah.
We were also lucky to have spent a whole summer, you know, like we had lived a whole lot of life leading right up to that point. So there was things to reflect on, and there was ideas of songs to go to. Maceo had pieces of a good amount of the songs. The lyrics for Cynthia were already written. Lonely as a Book on the Shelf, that concept was already there. You know, a lot of the, even if it was just the smallest amount, that was really helpful to have all these little ideas to expand on in a time where, yeah, sometimes it wasn't feeling super inspired to maybe start something from scratch for myself. And it was really helpful to have these bits and pieces to build on and spend time turning into full, really, really amazing songs, I think.
I think the record's incredible.
And also I think part of what pushed us or was inspiring was also we had never had our own space to like record music outside of our homes, and like we had just spent all this time building this and like getting shit for it and getting it ready, and it was just like excited to just go crazy in there also. You know, I think if I was staring at the same home studio that I was staring at prior to that, probably would have been a little less inspired to like get up and go to the studio 5 days a week.
Yeah, if it was right next to the living room, I might have just been on the couch.
Exactly.
You had to put the effort in to get there and everything. I guess that's probably a lot of it too.
Just to have
I'm here, I
somewhere
gotta
go.
work. Yeah.
Just like a safe, responsible place to go during the lockdown where we were still in our bubble, but able to be out of the house and be together, getting creative was such a blessing.
Were you able to work? I mean, obviously you guys just put out the record, but were you working on other stuff now? I mean, or is it just keep going? Are you constantly writing?
Yeah, I
there's
mean,
always, yeah.
yeah, there's like hard drives and hard drives worth of stuff because, like Nick at that point wasn't living in the neighborhood. And so he would travel up during the daytime and we would like finish and work on a bunch of stuff. And then afterwards, in the nighttime, it'd be like, okay, well, let me work on some stuff by myself, or let me hit up my buddy that I make beats with down the street. And so like I think we both like just kept, even if there weren't things that would traditionally have been like something I thought it's going to be like an homage record or something that was like, okay, it's going to go in this direction. Um, the I guess it continuously started to grow as we got to experiment more with what our sound could be. I think at certain points you get, if it doesn't sound like this and it isn't recorded like this and it's not a homage record, or what are they going to think? And it's like, well, no one's checking for that, first of all. And also like, that's not what it's about. And so I think as much as like there's so many different things that looking at it, not sure if this is going to turn into a full song or not, just getting it out and allows for a lot of possibilities.
That's amazing. Well, I appreciate your guys' time. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Nick, Maceo, I have one more question for you both. I want to see if I can get an answer from each of you, though. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Yeah, I would say, as simple and maybe unhelpful as this is, but just get started and just do it. Lay an idea out. Try a show. Try all these things out because no one's really clocking you and watching you as closely as you are watching yourself and being tough on yourself, creatively and business wise. Like your friends, your fans, everyone's just proud and happy that you exist and that you're making your ideas come true. So just like continue to do it. You can always edit it later. Like if you have an idea, don't worry about if it's good or not. Like just put that idea down, because the next week you might not remember that idea, and who knows how good it was. It's always better to be able to come back to something and decide if you like it or not, as opposed to in the moment decide that you're not sure of it or you're being judgmental of yourself and then you just don't even document it. So
I love it. I love that. What about you, Maceo?
Yeah, I would say like definitely just get your hands dirty and do it. And then also, don't wait on other people. I think like for better or worse, artists have to be everything for themselves, and both on the business end, but also as on the creative end and the writing and recording end. Like if the idea is there, lay it down. If you want to hear what it sounds with the keyboard on it, try and figure out what's gonna, you may not be a drummer, but like if you hear something, try and lay it down. And by the same token, if you want to see something happen, either business wise or career wise, you can't really, you can't depend and wait on other people to make those things happen. You really, at least personally, I feel like you have to have your hands in it all, because no one's going to care about it as much as you. So.